Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is Margaret Pennard, and you're on BookTube. So today is a Wednesday, so we've got a Wednesday wrap-up. I will be talking to you about 3 books that I've read in the past week, and I read them for longer than a week, but I finished them all yesterday because I wanted to have 3 to present to you today. So only one of them is for May of the Moderns, but I'll start with that one and give you all the gory details. If you're new here, my name is Margaret Pennard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy writer, and I'm hosting a readathon this month. It's called May of the Moderns. I love reading books you've never heard of, so I host this readathon in May to read books written, translated, and published between 1901 and 1945, roughly the end of the Victorian period to the end of World War II. And I've already got, 4 down. And in this last week of May, I'm trying to fit in a few more, just to give you an idea of modern themes, modern styles, all that good stuff. So I've got some prompts over there, but not necessary to do the prompts. Although, if you want to try, it's doable in 2 books to complete all the prompts. Check it out on Storygraph, and the details are down below. So, hello. What's the book that I read for today? Well, anyone want to guess? Ta-da! George Orwell's The Road to Wigan, Pier. And I think that's how you say it, but if any British person wants to correct me, I will happily be corrected. And I got a used paperback copy. That's what this is. I read over half of it yesterday because I was desperately trying to finish. And I was racing past things that I knew I would want to spend more time on, but I wanted to have something to present to you today. So here we are. So let's start with why I picked up this book, how I read it, the format, the sort of stats for me, right? So used paperback, got it from Backstory. You can tell by the pencil on the inside, one of my favorite used bookstores here in Portland. And I'm definitely going to keep this book because like I said, I raced past a lot of stuff that I thought was really interesting, and his voice is very interesting. So I want to digest it again. So I'll definitely be keeping this on my shelf, even though I'm not going to be doing Moderns again as a readathon. General enjoyment. I did really enjoy reading this. It was written in 1937 for a series of nonfiction books about Britain. And so George Orwell was given a freelance gig. He was dispatched to the north of England and told to report on the conditions there. Not exactly what he ended up doing. So in his contract, I think they switched some things around. This is like written in the introduction. He has a whole second half of the book that is sort of meandering, my autobiographical and ponderings on socialism. So he said to the publisher, well, you have to publish that if you publish the first part. So they did this very apologetic, sorry anyone if you're offended, kind of trying to soften the blow, but this is what we got from our contractor. Here you go. So it's an interesting sort of hodgepodge. And I was picking up lots of threads with other modern books, first of all, but also historical fiction about this kind of period in different parts of the world. So I'll clue you into that when I talk about some of the elements I like. He definitely uses the first half when he's describing coal miners' work and home and job and the economic situation in the north of England, to lay the groundwork for his second half, where he's talking about the situation is untenable. It is unsustainable to have this many millions of men people, but especially men in this time period, on unemployment, on the PAC, on the dole. And then he leads to his explanation about why. um, so his themes are definitely a lot about class difference, class distinction, class snobbery, class hatred, as well as socialism, industrialization. A lot of the current writers that he was contemporary with, he brings into his discussion, and this would be a great book if you were looking for examples in fiction from the period, because he references several from the past like 30, 40 years and says, oh, that was crap, or oh, that was really interesting, and he got it right, or he got part of it right. And so you get a sense of where he stood among his contemporaries, which is really pretty neat without having to read, another view of him. Let's see. And style. Okay, so the introduction covers bits about his style that gave me a good perspective. But reading it, this is his nonfiction, so not down and out, although that is largely drawn from his experience at fictionalized. Not Animal Farm, which is what we all had to read in school, at least I did, but definitely nonfiction, autobiographical, journalistic nonfiction. And it's very no filter, right? So he talks about people and habits and manners being disgusting to him and to other people, and why the relationship is like that and how we're bred up to be like that. So he gets a little into sociology here in his exploration of class, which I find very fascinating, but it's a bit rough to read because it's so harsh and direct. And I think, at least I am not used to hearing people being called smelly, dirty, disgusting, these kinds of things, just outright like this. But he makes a good point that you need to do this to get over yourself, to get over your snobbery, to be able to embrace a sort of future together, any sort of progress of the social machine. And I say that on purpose because he doesn't like the machine society. So, what else? It was a very fast read. Like I finished over half of it in an hour and a half. So even though it's just over 200 pages, it was a pretty quick read. And the second half, like I said, is somewhat autobiographical, but also argumentation. He goes through about 3 chapters about his upbringing and why his experimentation has led to his opinions, but then it's argumentative about why this society leads to this. And I'll read an excerpt about his view of what the future looked like. So from 1937 to 2023, it should be interesting to hear what he thought it was going to be like in just 20, 40 years, and now we're 100 years later. So. Let's see. Oh, I have a quote. Oh, okay. So if you were here before and you know that I reviewed The Tin Flute by Gabriel Roy, then you will know this quote that I read from that book. So the book reads in Jean's dialogue, one day he would feel a great love for them and wanted nothing but to devote his life to social reform. The next day he would be filled with contempt for the masses, feel himself above them and predestined for higher things. So one of the characters in The Tin Flute really reminded me of Orwell's view in Wigan, Pier. So a fictional character in Canada, in Montreal area, really reminding me of the real life George Orwell in London and how they're interacting with the working classes as middle class people, right? So Jean in The Tin Flute is the person who's on his way up and he doesn't care who he tramples or gets pregnant, etc. And George Orwell is here trying to embrace a future where there's more egalitarianism and there's not this unsustainable despair that he's seeing in his country in a way that makes sense to him. And he's like trying to get over this squeamishness about smells and whatnot. So it's like the middle class and the working class trying to come to terms with each other, but there's all these obstacles in the way. So I thought that was a pretty cool connection. And if you're curious about the themes, I did talk about some of these themes about class in a previous video. So I'll just pop that in the chat. Oh, and I can see Leslie's here. Hi, Leslie. She's waving. Nice to see you. Let's see. I had a question of the day. So if you're there and you're listening and you're up for a question of the day, because I finished 3 books yesterday in order to get this wrap up ready. What is your best tip for cramming a lot of reading in? What I did was walk 6 miles, finish the audio book. I still had 15 minutes after I got home, and then have dinner, have a shower, read for an hour and a half, finished a book, take a break, did a thing for work, read for another hour and 10 minutes, finished a book, and I was like, whew, I got all 3 done. But if you have other tips, let me know in the comments. So yeah. And then since I read from Tin Flute, I'll read a little bit from The Road to Wigan Pier, because his writing is, like I said, so direct, abrupt, a bit pushy, a bit like maybe you do need to edit yourself, right? But this is a really funny passage. So he's talking about people moving among the classes, and he says it's very hard to do for various reasons. But one of the most successful transformations, talks about trades unions, officials as one, but the other one that is a really easy way to go from working class to middle class is if you are one of the literary intelligentsia and you don't fit in the working class and you sort of dream of something different. But this is what he had to say. To begin with, it is a pity, though it is a natural result of the scholarship system, that the proletariat should tend to interpenetrate the middle class via the literary intelligentsia. For it is not easy to crash your way into the literary intelligentsia if you happen to be a decent human being. The modern English literary world, at any rate the highbrow section of it, is a sort of poisonous jungle where only weeds can flourish. It is just possible to be a literary gent and to keep your decency if you are a definitely popular writer, a writer of detective stories, for instance. But to be a highbrow with a footing in the snootier magazines means delivering yourself over to horrible campaigns of wire pulling and backstairs crawling. And I don't really understand this language except the feeling that it gives. In the highbrow world, you get on, if you get on at all, not so much by your literary ability as by being the life and soul of cocktail parties and kissing the bums of verminous little lions. This, then, is the world that most readily opens its doors to the proletarian who is climbing out of his own class. So, yeah, not much has changed. So I just thought that tickled me. I definitely marked that yesterday and thought it was fun. So I thought I'd poke fun. Let's see. I will check in with the chat. Hey, Nick. See if you want to give us a tip about cramming in reading, because I know you've had to juggle a lot of things for study and work and life, so maybe you have some tips to share. But welcome. And then the other thing I wanted to draw people's attention to, we've got some events, so I'll just put it here. For the Patreon book club in June, we're going to be reading one of 2 books. It's either Sister Song or The Witch's Heart. I've heard good things, but there's a pull up on my community tab. So if you want to help us decide and weigh in, that is where you can go to cast your vote. Because I'd love to know. They both sound really good. Obviously, I have them both, so I'll read them eventually. My first master's taught me how to skim read and read with purpose. So stress. Okay. Yeah. Just to take a side tangent here. I just started a new job. It's my second week, and I am on again, off again using this lifeat.io app where there's delta waves and theta waves and rain sounds and different backgrounds and kind of like your Christmas fireplace log or whatever. And going in pomodoros, sort of as long as I can for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and it like heightens my senses in a weird sort of way, or like makes me tense up, and I'm like intensely focused on these tasks and all the different points I have to do because you have to remember all these different things for these posts. Anyway, it's not coming naturally. There's a lot of moving pieces, and so like yeah, the stress of it is helping me concentrate, but that's not a great answer. But thank you, Nick. I know. All right. So that was Wigan Pier. Now we're going to pass on to the non-modern book, which is very new and very fascinating, but very unusual. So it's called Thin Places, A Natural History of Healing and Home by Carrie Doherty. And it's got a blurb from Robert McFarlane, one of my favorite nature writers, saying, "I don't think I've ever read a book as open-hearted as this." So I bought this hardcover, new for Independent Bookstore Day, and read it right away. That was only like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So I really wanted to dive into it. It's got a really pretty cover. I don't know if you could see like the foil and the colors on the moth wing. So very pretty edition, and that's where it came from. That's why I picked it up. I actually picked it up because of another Irish writer who I just finished their book, and I will pop that in the comments, but I can't remember it now because I thought it would be similar, but it was not. But it's okay. It ended up being a different avenue. Still very interesting. So what this is, Thin Places, is a novel about trauma and grief and healing for this one woman writer. She is from Northern Ireland. She grew up there. It was the middle of the Troubles. She explains the heightened vigilance and the bombings and the hatred and the not fitting in, and the fact that she had a mother and father who were on either side, so they didn't fit in anywhere, and how that affected her childhood. So that's where we start off. And she basically is on this journey to heal her response to trauma as a child. So we get to hear a little bit about a lot of things. We don't get too deep with language for places. So like her name is the original Irish, which is not how she started out. So that was a choice. She goes into a little bit about place naming in Northern Ireland with the Old Irish and muses about what happens when we lose the names for things and our connection to place sort of withers, and we lose our feeling of being part of the world as part of her like moving through all this trauma. But it doesn't get in too deep, so you don't learn like any language stuff really. I wish there was more of that, if you can't tell. The nature of the places she stays, so as you might think from the moth wing that's on the cover, she does use nature as a metaphor. She definitely mentions things that come to her in dreams or special experiences that she has in real life that are interacting with animals and nature. She's got a crow that appears several times, a fox that appears several times, a couple meaningful interactions with whooper swans. I think that's how you say it. Whooper. Maybe it depends on how you say whooping cough. But not really getting into like the science or their relationship with the ecology of the place, which I also thought might have been neat. But that's not pursued in any depth of way. The structure, like I said, is interesting. I get a very circular feeling. So we start off hearing about her childhood trauma, and then she talks about the places that she's moved and the events that she's had since then, but doesn't get into specifics. So we hear about the first like petrol bombing when she's 3 years old, and we hear about her grandfather's death and some of the other events in her life, but not in a chronological way, more like a when she comes to terms with them in different places. And it feels like it's a little um, circular. She talks about circles and how they have meaning for her. And the structure feels like that. Like it's constantly scraping something different when it comes around to the same thought and processing it differently. So it's interesting. So no beginning, no end. I thought that was neat. I said the journey is interior and geographical leaving is a metaphor for her leaving self. So, you know, I'm also reading this book, which is probably informing my reading. The Body Keeps the Score, and like how we process trauma and memory. So when she's talking about like running from places because she can't handle things, and then finding a place where she feels like she fits, and it's like the opposite of these thin places. So the word thin places is really meant to mean where it feels like the veil between your present self and like the spirit of the world is thin. So it's not like an other world, but it's like the world as it is instead of the world as you perceive it based on all your experiences and like scars and whatnot. It's very thought-provoking. So it's very interesting. Her style is simple, clear, very strong language. It's a bit poetry-like, but it fades in and out. So it's not like that the whole time. And to give you a little taste, I've got like a couple paragraphs that I picked out here that were interesting. So she's talking about growing up and her parents splitting up, and then the violence that was happening in Northern Ireland in the 80s and 90s. That temperamental red Volvo allowed our mom to take her children as far away as she could with whatever spare fuel money she had from working long, hard shifts in the hotel. She took us from beach to cove, over bogland to woods, alongside streams into fields, allowing the invisible line of the border to act as some unseen mythical protector. We were delivered across it through grace that felt sent from a place unknown, fabled, and with an urgent sense of secrecy. Many of the places we spent time in, I realized later, were places where the veil was gossamer thin, if it was even there at all. We spent days upon days in places bathed in deep and indefinable energy. We walked in two worlds in a way, woven together, knitted so loosely, with such delicacy, that separation faded, even if only for a moment. So it's very like dreamlike when she's talking about some of this stuff, when she's like envisioning or relaying what's gone through her head. So yeah, really, really nice. Harriet Doherty, Thin Places. She's got a new book that just came out as well. I think I saw when I went on to Twitter. So there's that to look forward to. And if you're just coming in, I've got a poll that I popped in the chat. So if you want to vote in the poll for the Backstage Book Club next week, I'd love your input between those two books that we're reading. I also had a question of the day. So Leslie was weighing in. I don't think I have any decent tips, but recently I dropped everything, stayed outside of my apartment to remove distractions so I could focus on reading. Yeah. So Books, Gers, and Purrs has this special project going that every month she's focusing on a certain reader, which would personally drive me crazy because I like a lot of variety. And if I had to read, like 3 books on the same person, I think I would probably want to run a drill through my head. But she's doing a great job, like delving deep into a writer and their work and their oeuvre. So well done, Leslie. Nick says stress really does a number on our brain. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm hoping it's going to work out. It seems like a pretty good fit. I'm going to add this to my, okay, TBR. Got it. Thin places. Yeah, I mean, if you want, I can send my copy to you. I don't think I need to keep it. I think like the experience of moving through it once is probably enough for me. So if you want me to mail it to you, Nick, get in touch. Medium mail is not bad. It's like $3. Emma Bennett is here. Hello, hello. I keep pushing the time later and later, and people just show up at the end, which is fine. Hi, Shannon. Esty Houston is here. No poll. No poll? It's on my community tab. I'll put it in the chat again. Boop. There's the direct link. Marilyn Maya Mendoza saying aloha. Hi, hi, hi. And Leslie says, oh, I'm definitely going crazy. Okay. Well, good work. But maybe you can take a break soon and like go all out and do different books. That might be nice too. Okay, so we're on to the last book, and for that one, I have a different format, which means I have an overlay here. It's from, you guessed it, Libro.fm, because we love our Libro.fm audiobooks. This one, third book today, is called Gigi Listening by Chantal Guertin, narrated by Natalie Nodis. I think I misspelled her name. Yeah, I did. In the comments. Oh, well. So like I said, this is an audiobook. I listened to it, and part of my cramming in finishing reading yesterday was walking 6 miles so that I could like listen to it. I could only do 1.3 and still understand it, but that's pretty good. This is a romance, as you might be able to tell from the graphic sort of cover. It's got a different title for the UK version, Emma, if you're curious. And I don't know what that is. But, oh, okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Yes, the chat has the link and it's on my community tab. So it is a romance. So there are some parts I liked and some parts that I was like, this is stretching even for romance. So let me detail them. Positive points: wonderful chemistry between the love interest and our main character. And by the way, the main character is the owner of a bookshop called Love Interest because it's a romance bookshop. How cool is that? So I really liked that. That was a good setting, good setup and premise. So great chemistry, nice setup of elements in terms of backstory, exposition, structure, pacing. Really well done. Good humor. I liked like the comic exchanges, like really well done, good timing. Delightful use of setting and sights. So as a person who is an Anglophile, having someone go on a bus tour of the UK and stop at different places and experience the history and the majesty of the scenery, like I ate it up. So that was a great like add-on for me, in case that is also to your taste. And the basic premise is that she's fallen in love with the voice of a narrator of this audiobook. And so her friends get her a trip to go on a tour guided trip, bus tour, with the narrator as a tour guide, because that's his like main job. And so she's all aflutter that she's going to meet this guy whose voice she's fallen in love with, and hilarity and tragedy ensue basically before the happy ever after. So yes, it was very good. But I will caution you, there are, there's a spectrum of romance, realisticness. And so, it was very magical in terms of, the itinerary that they were able to fit in. That sort of bothered me because they were doing like 600 miles worth of sites and in one day. And I was like, you can't do all this in the UK in one day. No. And availability and abilities of the bus driver, the coach driver. So like he was always tagging behind her to see where she went and pop up when she wasn't expecting it. And so the availability of him in the landscape was like, he has a life, right? No. Also his abilities. So apparently one of the characters is like a med student that's dropped out, and he manages to diagnose someone on the tour, and saves the day, but also makes his own bookshelves. And funnily enough, our man George Orwell here describes how even if you wanted to like stay hard and not get corrupted by the machine society we're living in, and you decided to make your own table or make your own bookshelf, you're already buying wood that's like planed for you, and you're just sticking it together with a couple pegs. So really, you're not as hard as you think you are. And I was thinking about that with like, oh, this guy just made his own bookshelves, and that was sort of a character indicator. But yeah, a modern London med student dropout is not going to know how to do that, and they're going to be crappy shelves. So just, warning all those women. Anyway, so realisticness. Yes, and being able to do a transatlantic flight very quickly, that takes a lot of money. So someone who is a dropout med student is probably not going to be doing that. So there's lots of magical stuff that, as long as you suspend your grip on reality, because it is a romance and there's going to be like fantastical elements to get that happy ever after or happy for now, you'll be fine. And it's great. It's great. Oh, and the last thing I was like, what? Was the way everyone buys things for each other. Is that just me? That may be a just me thing, but like, I'll pick up a coffee for someone. I'll pick up a beer for someone. Pay for a meal, like give gifts to someone you met on the same tour. I wish I was able to do this, but realistically, like a bookstore owner, single woman, probably not going to be like, oh yeah, sure, money all over the place, right? So I don't know, maybe that's just me. But yeah. So yeah, good romance, very good feels. I definitely had like a tearful moment at the climax. Like when I came back, my walk was almost finished, and I came into the door, and like the emotional connection and like the pathos of that moment was so good and so well done. So like, yes, ultimately, definitely recommend. Gigi Listening by Chantal Guertin, read by Natalie Nodden. So there you go. Yes, Emma says, I want to go to the romance bookshop. So do I. I don't think there's one in the Pacific Northwest. So there's not one like nearby that I can go to. I think there is one in LA. So if I wanted to do a lot of driving when I go down to California in June, I might visit it, but that's a lot of driving. But I love this idea. I still want to be a bookstore owner someday. And Melissa's here from Fully Booked. Hello. The amount of money people throw around in books often annoys me. Lol. Yeah. Right? So like, okay, so it's not just me. It's kind of like, who was I just listening to talking about different money values? Is it MJ? Anyway, one of the videos I just watched from somebody was about like, oh, Katya Weinert. So she just reviewed a finance and like money beliefs book and did a really great review of how it's changed her life, having read it years and years ago, and like changed her ideas and beliefs and behavior. And it's your money or your life. And so she was talking about like all the stuff that came up and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, it's hard to get to the underlying beliefs about money because they're layered. It's like mixed in with class distinctions, as per our man Orwell said. Again, like you don't even know what you believe until you examine it and realize other people don't believe the same thing, but it's baked in that it's like hard to see sometimes. So yeah, very good stuff. So wait, there we go. Okay. So those are the 3 books I have for you today. I've got events coming up though. So let me just rattle those off and let you know. There's 1 week left of May of the Moderns. So we just had a buddy read chat with Greg of Another Bibliophile Reads, someone who I don't connect with that often, but we read The Underdogs by Mariano Azuela, and had some interesting thoughts. So that is a chat if you want to tune in for that. And Friday, I've got a reading corner, basically reading sprints Friday morning. And then Sunday, I'm having another chat, not a buddy read, but just like reflecting on May of the Moderns, books that we've read, favorites that we have over time, and themes that we see, themes that we like, and stuff like that with Sandy from Ms. Reads a Lot. So hopefully we'll see you there. That should be good fun. And there's the link. I popped it in the chat. Otherwise, I think that is all I have for you today. So May of the Moderns, have read 4, have read 5 now, completed the prompts. I think Greg is the only other person who's completed all the prompts, so he may get his pick of the 3 winning prizes. And I'm going to keep reading. I still got this monster. Still got the Frank O'Connor to finish, and other books to bring back to the library. But, you know, I'm mixing it up with more current reads and romances and audiobooks, and, you know, just keeping that diverse book list, which Melissa knows about because I stole the book tracker from her. So I will be reporting out on all the modern stuff at the beginning of June. I'm thinking of switching the format up a little bit and having them be standalone book reviews that are premieres instead of a big long live, because June is going to be very busy for me. I've got a lot of travel, I've got a lot of visiting, a lot of different work, not YouTube stuff. So we will be fitting in the premieres when we can. So yeah. And Marilyn says, yeah, Katya's video was great. I know, so good. So yeah, money beliefs are one of those things that are so hard to unearth and examine and be objective about, for sure. So that's why books help. So anyway, thank you all for coming by. If you have a tip for cramming reading in today's question of the day, pop it in the comments below. Even if you're watching on the replay, I am curious. And hopefully we'll see you on Friday to read together, or Sunday to chat with Sandy. Either way, happy week, happy reading. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Until next time.